Merry meet. Annie here. Welcome back to Tarot Together and the second in the series on the attributes for the Magician card. This attribute is that of communication. I mentioned in my first video in the attributes series for the Magician, I overlooked this. I overlooked the power of this when I first studied the tarot. I could parrot the attributes of the Magician as those of communication, but I didn't quite get it. I saw him more what he manifested in this world, related to or disconnected from his higher purpose. I saw more about physical manifestation and creation. I knew by reading the history of the card that he was linked to Hermes, the messenger, the Greek god, and the god of wisdom, Thoth, in Egypt, and also to Mercury, or Mercurius, the messenger god of the Romans. I was aware of his historical connection, stated very clearly by some of the older designers of the deck, various decks, Waite included, that he was a representation of Hermes Trismegistus, constantly referred to by Waite and others. Hermes Trismegistus being a combination of Hermes and Thoth and Mercury. And forgive the burp in the video. In the middle of that last sentence, mailman, miniature pincher, barking, mailman, leaving. Thank goodness for being able to edit videos. So I was aware of the connection of the Magician to Hermes and Thoth and Mercury and Hermes Trismegistus. Even his stance, the way he stands with one arm raised and one arm lowered, the iconography of that connects him to Hermes Trismegistus. And I knew that because of his relationship to the element of air, thought, speaking, verbalizing, that there was something about communication that was very powerful to him. But it just seems like I wasn't meant to really understand this deeply until recently. Something clicked. Well, the first thing that clicked was very simple, that communication is an alchemy, an act of alchemy. It was easier for me to understand when I was young. Creation of physical sense, making something of our skill or our prowess, was alchemy. We had the power of bringing things together and making something else out of them. But I needed to get older before I really understood the power of thought and verbalizing as an act of alchemy. Manipulating, in a way, words, putting them out there and creating something because of them. Nothing that we do happens without our thinking of it first. The power of air moves through us, and before we physically do anything, whether words in our mind or words that we speak, we make a declaration. That's the power of communication in the Magician's world. Here's something that I wanted to share with you I read recently. It comes from Stephen Holler's book, On the Trail of the Winged God, Hermes and Hermeticism Throughout the Ages. And of course, since Waite was inspired by and very knowledgeable, Hermes and Hermes Trismegistus was an important part of his symbolism in the card. Holler writes, referring to another writer, the British scholar R.F. Willits wrote that in many ways Hermes is the most sympathetic, the most baffling, the most confusing, the most complex, and therefore the most Greek of the Olympian gods. Okay, well that gave me an out then, that when I started reading about Hermes when I was trying to understand the power of the magician in communication, that I kind of got lost in all his various stories that weaved in and out of each other, and the way that he appeared blended with Hermes and Thoth and Mercury. So that was my excuse then for maybe not getting him earlier in my life. Huller goes on to say, if Hermes is the god of the mind, then those qualities appear in an even more meaningful light. For the mind itself is, for is the mind not the most baffling, confusing, and at the same time beguiling of all the attributes of life? Stop to think. Is not your mind baffling and confusing and beguiling? And not just to others, but to you. He continues by saying, versatility and mutability are Hermes' most prominent characteristics. His specialties are eloquence and invention. He invented the lyre. He's the god of travel and the protector of sacrifices. He's also god of commerce and good luck. The common quality in all of these is, again, consciousness. The agile movement of the mind that goes to and fro, joining humans and gods, assisting the exchange of ideas and commercial goods. I like that so much. I'll say it again. The agile movement of mind that goes to and fro, joining humans and gods. That's a description of the yellow sky standing behind the magician. And then he concludes with, consciousness has a shadow side, however. Hermes is also noted for cunning and for fraud, perjury, and theft. Another quote that helped me. I saw it, I think, on Goodreads. It referred to this person's website, which, in all honesty, I didn't think much of, but I really liked the quote. Jennifer Saldini, and it referred to her blog as Evolve and Ascend website. I did go there. Didn't find anything of interest there, but I did really love this simplistic way of thinking of communication, of language as alchemy, that which the magician creates. Language is the alchemy of transforming a thought into a word, and the word into a new reality. From here, outwards, and then manifested in a tangible way. The magician. Another quote which I found very helpful recently, this is a recent find, is from Terence McKenna. Interesting man, a fun read always. He writes a lot on nature and shamanism, metaphysics and alchemy, and loves to explore in his writings and in his life altered realities. He loves to explore the journey into the mind and what comes out of that. You could say he's a magician. This quote from Terence McKenna. The syntactical, and that word stopped me, so I didn't get much further in reading that quote before I looked up syntactical, which simply means verbalizing. The syntactical nature of reality, the real secret of magic, is that the world is made of words. And if you know the words that the world is made of, you can make of it whatever you wish. The magician in all of us looks outward into the world and names everything in it. Establishes that communication. I know you. I name you. The power of the alchemical power of thought, thinking, becoming, manifesting. Attributes of the magician's wisdom. Any thought that we have that becomes declared in the form of word, which is speaking and writing equally. It's a transformation, a creation. It's a birthing of something that wasn't until we thought it. Just as the physical act of creation, which often follows that, is. It's creating something greater out of bringing together a bunch of thoughts, assembling the bits and pieces, and making something of it. Our process for thinking, that chaotic process that happens in here, it's kind of grabby, don't you think? All these things that we grab, twirl around in our mind, and through the process of our personal mental alchemy, they settle into something, some declaration. Words become then communication. We're communicating in a way with ourselves as we solidify all that confusing maelstrom of thought into a reality. And we are also then, when we speak or write, sharing that reality with anyone who reads the words or listens to what we say. I was studying the goddess Suadela. I continually look for new information studying her because she's part of a series of goddesses which have come to mean a great deal to me. She's a goddess of persuasion through her actions, but especially through her words. My chaotic thinking process gave birth to an understanding of the magician that deepened when I realized that all the years that I had been studying Suadela and her power of persuading through her words and actions was indeed a deepening of my relationship to the magician and to my inner magician. All persuasion, when it comes to the goddess Suadela, is a form of seduction. When it comes to bringing others in, influencing them, and knowing you have the ability to do it with your words. It's power of communication within our sphere of influence. It's not just the act of persuading, of being able to communicate in a way to put something out there and have someone else understand it. It's knowing in the process of that you're doing it. That's the confidence of the magician in him and in us. When it comes to Suadela, two of the things that I have in my list of attributes for her, which fit so perfectly into the concept of communication and the magician. Seduction so subtle as to be unnoticed. The magician. The magician is a trickster with a little bit of sleight of hand going on there. Maybe those who hear his words don't even know they're being manipulated. And also the power of beguiling eloquence. I love that, beguiling eloquence. Well, some of this description I just said make it seem as if, well, communication is not one of the most powerful, positive, let's say, attributes of the magician. But one of the learnings of his card is we, are always just one step short of being the trickster, beguiling eloquence. But the one thing in common between his various forms of thought into words, the alchemy of words, clear communication. Communication with an intent. There's no ramblings here. There is focus behind his words. At his best, is thinking of him surrounded with the yellow sky of consciousness and greater consciousness, and his connection to above and below, and the understanding of each reflected in the other. At his very best, he represents communication that is inspired. He knows where it comes from, where he lets himself be informed by what surrounds him, that he understands even that which he does not quite understand, but his sense of being connected to a higher purpose, a greater will. It's communication that is inspired, resilient, flexible. Flexible, the energy moving above and below, within and without. It's a mutable, flexible, bendable energy. And also, as he stands firmly positioned in the center of his card, frozen, for just that moment in time, the power of communication with the magician is well-timed, appropriate, right now communication. And it's communication in all of its forms, which we don't want to forget. It is everything from eye contact to words to body language, to the way emotions are shared, to the deeds that are done. It's everything that rises from him into the wider world, the result of his intentionally formed words. The beguiling eloquence rising out of, as Holer wrote, the agile movement of mind that goes to and fro, joining humans and gods. We think it, we say it, we make it so. Words. The world is made of words, and if we know the words the world is made of, we can make of it whatever we wish. The wisdom of the reversals for the magician. The experience of the magician outside of proper time, too much or not enough of the influence of his attributes. At the top is the inability to communicate clearly. If that alchemical transformation hasn't happened between the jumbling of things happening in our mind, we can't come down to a point of clarity to speak from that. We don't communicate clearly. Outwardly, and also inwardly, if we cannot make something solid out of our thoughts and give a word to them. Poorly timed communication. It can be the suddenly blurting out of something that there's no benefit beyond ego of putting it out there in the moment. It's a sense of self so strong not to realize, perhaps, what another wants and needs to hear in the moment. We're so well into the power of beguiling eloquence, we've forgotten it isn't just about us. It's lack of creativity within the power of communication. Creation, making manifest, so much a part of the magician's world. But an example of lack of creativity. All this jumble in our brain comes down to words that we speak. And we're facing someone who gives us a blank look. They're just not getting it. So what do? We say it again. And then we say it again louder. And then we say it again with a bit of frustrating tone to our voice, like, what's the matter with you, stupid? You don't get what I'm saying? And we've totally lost our ability to create. The alchemy of our words is rearrange them. Realign them in the brain and say the same thing in a different way. We can get stuck in a rut in this power of the alchemy of communication. When we create something, put it out there, and kind of lose our connection to it, don't realize that it's always mutable and changeable. My greatest image of communication gone awry with a magician, it's kind of like, because it's one of my greatest faults in life. I call it talking head syndrome. I tend to be rather of a pontificator in life with my style of communication when it comes especially to groups. I do hope I've learned not to be that way, one-on-one, with those I care about. But the talking head syndrome of the magician is that taking center stage and assuming the posture that is so much a part of who he is. You kind of forget that communication is a two-way street. Check out his body language when it comes up as a reversal, when it comes to you're thinking that communication enters the picture. Yeah, he's like, look at me, distance from you, and listen to what I say. I'm not listening to you. Just listen to what I pronounce. The talking head syndrome. Those are some of my thoughts regarding the magician and the alchemy of communication. That ended up being a really important aspect of the card for me. Maybe because I had as much to learn by it in its reversals as I did by it in its more positive attributes. Your input regarding the subject of communication and the magician is welcome below and on our Facebook group. Information for that follows. This series on the attributes for the magician's card will continue in the next video.